just a minute. I have done something. So I'm not able to.
Let it be.
No. Start my video. I'll just check now what I have done. Give me a minute. Just give me a minute.
म्यूट केलं आपलं ते एको होईल ना नाही का नाही मी म्यूट केलं का
म्हणजे हे चालू आहे का आणि मी ऍडजस्ट करायला कॅमेरा ऑफ केला
Now it's fine.
Okay.
Now it's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. I had to call Sneha for that. But yeah. Okay. Sure. We can start anytime.
Net connection is unstable. Now what to do? What?
Yes, students, yeah, just begin the program. Shruti, your mic.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Now you are audible. Yes.
Okay, so I will be starting the program. Good afternoon, one and all. I'm Shruti Pandey from FYBMM, SPN Doshi Women's College. A warm welcome to our dear principals, the resource person, faculties from over various departments, and our eminent speakers and our very dear audience. Today, we are conducting the fourth webinar on the series, In Search of Our Past, Roots of Feminist Consciousness Among the Women in Bhakti Movement. The resource person for this webinar is Dr. Anaga Tambe ma'am. Anaga Tambe ma'am, we are very pleased to have you with us. Thank you for joining us today and a very heartful welcome from everyone. This webinar is organized by IQAC and Women's Development Cell of SPN Doshi Women's College. It is a part of the broad themed spectrum Indian Feminism Through the Ages. The first session was held on 23rd December 2021 and it was inaugurated by the Honorable Vice Chancellor of SNDT Women's University, Professor Ujjwala Chakradev. Her motivating presence inspired us to conduct the section further. The resource person for that webinar was Professor Vibhuti Patel. The second session was on 9th January 2022 by Dr. Uma Chakravarti on Expression on Feminism in Terigata, poems by Buddhist nuns.
Shruti, there is a echo. So will you please put off one of your, I think your mobile is also on.
Yes, ma'am, I have muted her.
Okay.
Okay, so now I am not echoing.
No.
Okay, so shall I continue?
Yeah.
Yes, the second session was on 9th January 2022 by Dr. Uma Chakravarti on Expression on Feminism in Terigata, poems by Buddhist nun. The third session revolved around Indian Feminism Through Women's Movement songs by Dr. Lata Pratibha Madhukar on 9th February 2022.
Feminism has revolved throughout the decades and is deep-rooted onto the minds of people. Exploring the fascinating journey of feminism and reflects on a movement where women have been searching for alternative images, questioning the sexually defined roles. Women's role in pre-colonial social structure reveals that feminism was theorized differently than India in the West. Further, I would like to invite our dynamic principal, Dr. Asha Menon ma'am, to offer the welcome address. Asha ma'am, please.
Thank you, Shruti. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the national webinar on In Search of Our Past, Roots of Feminist Consciousness Among the Women in Bhakti Movement, organized by IQAC and Women's Development Cell of Srimati P. N. Doshi Women's College, Mumbai, which is affiliated to SNDT Women's University, Mumbai. This webinar is the fourth in the series on the theme Indian Feminism Through Ages. We all know Bhakti movement laid the roots of feminism in India. With sheer bravery, tenacity, and their devotion to God, they created an autonomous space for themselves and refused to be tied down by the society norms, which is, very appealing. Feminism was not a very popular concept when Bhakti movement was taking shape in India, but their sheer sense of individualism and power through spirituality made the rise of women's voice prominent in Bhakti tradition. We can trace the elements of feminism through their songs, poems, and ways of life. This perhaps paves the way for the beginning of Indian feminism. Through devotion, that is Bhakti, these women tried to define their truths to improve society, relationships, and religion. Let me not take away everyone's time because we have a very learned resource person today to speak on this topic. She is none other than Dr. Anagha Tambe. Welcome, madam. We are eagerly waiting to hear from you. I would also like to welcome all the principals, vice principals, and coordinators, and the IQAC coordinator and the teams, teachers and participants to this webinar. We are very happy to see such an overwhelming response to this webinar. Wishing this webinar the very best, and I congratulate Dr. Rekha Randive and her team for organizing this webinar. Thank you so much. Over to Shruti.
Thank you, ma'am. And further, I would like to invite Dr. Rekha Randive ma'am from the Home Science Department. She is also Vice Principal as well as the in charge of Women's Development Cell. Rekha ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Shruti. It's my privilege to introduce such a dynamic personality, Dr. Anagha Tambe madam. I'm sure I'm not going to do justice within few minutes, but nevertheless, I will try my best. Dr. Anagha Tambe madam is a director and assistant professor at KSP Women's Studies Center, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. She holds doctorate from University of Mumbai and MPhil from Delhi School of Economics after her post-graduation from University of Pune. Madam has a broad area of research which includes gender, caste and sexual labor, genealogy of women's studies in India, and inequalities and democracy in higher education. Madam has published on ritual, prostitution, and debates on sex work in post-colonial India. Anagha madam has been engaged in designing and teaching courses and developing critical bilingual pedagogies in women's studies. She has edited, translated, and written many teaching learning resources in women's studies, especially in Indian languages. She was General Secretary, Indian Association for Women's Studies from the year 2017 to 2020. Her current research aims to investigate the transformation in performance labor in contemporary India by studying experiences and voices of heredity, lower caste women performers. She is the recipient of Fulbright Nehru Academic and Professional Excellence Fellowship 2018-19. Madam has actually got a lot of research and publications to her credit, which is based on gender in higher education. And definitely, I cannot list all of them here, But with this brief note, I would welcome Anagha Madam for this today's webinar. Thank you, and over to Shruti.
Thank you, ma'am, for the very well introduction of the speaker. We are really blessed to have you with us, Anita ma'am. You are such a dynamic personality. And without wasting more time, I would like to invite Dr. Anita ma'am to start the session. Over to you, Anita ma'am.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Dr. Randive, Dr. Menon, for having me here and to give me this opportunity to talk to such diverse gathering, scholars, teachers from all across India. Thank you, Professor Vibhuti Patel, for connecting with me, connecting me with them. It is always always good to speak in the sessions when Vibhuti is there and when Vibhuti has introduced that. So thank you, Vibhuti. What I would do today, since you have been looking at discussing the roots of feminist consciousness or the historical map, historical journey of feminist consciousness in India. Today, I would speak on Bhakti movement, the devotional movement, very broadly, what we call medieval India, tentatively from 13th century to 17th century in Maharashtra. Earlier, first in northern India, then here, and in southern India, it was even before that, before the 13th century, 7th, 8th century. So we would talk about Bhakti movement, the Bhakti movement. That was the movement of, what generally scholars have argued, that it is the movement of devotion and descent. So it is not seen only in the context of devotion, bhakti, religiosity, but also in the context of social transgression, social dissent, disagreement, and critique that the saints, bhakti saints, women and men from across different castes and communities have waged. And I would therefore would like to, in that sense, put forth Bhakti movement and its egalitarianism, its vision of egalitarianism, its vision of democracy, democratizing, so to say, the world of religion and divinity to common people, to all the people. And we would try to map it on we would try to put it on the map of the feminist journey, feminist consciousness in India. And we would and we would look at specifically the lives of women saints, their voices, but also their memories. We need to recognize that Bhakti movement is not something that only happened in the past, but it is a living tradition. So it is not a heritage which was which can be freezed, in the past, which can be freezed in some time, in some region, but it is we need to unfreeze. Now there is this very interesting work by Gabrielle Dietrich, who actually argues that we need to, she talks about Mira, unfreezing Mirabai. So in that sense, rather than freezing them in certain location in medieval India, we need to see what has been the living tradition of Bhakti movement, what have been the memories of these Bhakti saints, how they are remembered, how they are sung, how they are invoked. We know that diverse Bhakti saints, from Kabir to Andal to Mirabai, they have been, and all across India, from Maharashtra, Janabai and Bainabai, Jnaneshwar, all of them, they have been invoked, re-invoked, remembered several times throughout this history, in colonial period and even today, even in today's what we call globalizing times. I mean, they are part of our cultural sensibilities. And therefore, I would like to discuss today, I would like to talk about what have been the possibilities and also limitations. I mean, the struggles and limitations of the resistance, of the dissent that these women Bhakti saints, Bhakti poets have put forth, and how they have been remembered, how they are sung, and who are the people who remember these saints, who are the people who sing them, how do they remember them? Do they remember them in the way they were remembered in their times, or they were treated in their times, or have they been remembered by completely different? So where there are very interesting works on how, again, a very interesting title, Mirabai Goes to America, in the sense that how Mirabai has been remembered and invoked even in the international, transnational context. So that will be broadly my framework for today's lecture. Yet I want to start with certain clarifications, so to say. I do want to say that this is not, in that sense, a claim for or a call for indigenous feminism, a singular Indian feminism which is in opposition to the so-called Western feminism. So we are not saying, we are not dismissing the feminist voices, the feminist trajectories, the feminist knowledges, and even the feminist activism, feminist politics that has taken place in different parts of the world. We are not really saying that we don't need them, they are different from us, they are not applicable to us, they are not useful for us, or we cannot work with those feminist those feminisms in the Indian context. So I think we need to be cautious about that. Nor are we saying that there is one indigenous Indian feminism, singular kind of Indian feminisms. Now, as your lecture series itself has pointed out, as it has revealed, and I'm glad that through this lecture series you're pointing out, you're bringing out very different trajectories of feminism in India, right? And sometimes these feminist trajectories, these feminist voices are not just different from each other. Sometimes they are also critique of each other. No, they contest each other. Sometimes they go with each other, but sometimes they also contest with each other. Not all Bhakti saints, in that sense, spoke in one voice. So I also therefore want to say that rather than urging for, yearning for a singular indigenous feminism, we need to see what have been the dialogues across feminisms, across global and local feminism, so to say. So I mean, for instance, Bhakti and devotionalism has not been a heterodox movement only in India or South Asia, but there have been very interesting works on slave religiosities. I mean, we see devotionalism and its transgressive potential, its resistance, also in other parts other parts of the world, and also in other religions. And therefore, it will be really good, though I mean we can't really do it today. But for us who are interested in this, we should also explore the dialogues and the connections between these the devotional trajectories across the world. So that is one clarification that I want to give before I start. The second kind of clarification is that I mean, Bhakti movement itself is very vast, very multi-layered, and it has specific histories in terms of time and region, as I said. Now, so I'm going to talk about more broadly, drawing from the Bhakti poets, women Bhakti poets, from Lal Ded in Kashmir to maybe Andal in southern India, in Tamil Nadu, or from Janabai or Bahinabai to Meera. So I'm not really going into the specific devotional traditions, because these are Vaishnavite devotional traditions, Shaivite, no? So these are very different devotional traditions. These have actually, these were present in different periods of time, in different regions. So I'm not really going into the specificities of any of these. I mean, and rather that is not really my expertise. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to speak more from the feminist reading of the feminist historians and feminist scholars that have who have read actually the Bhakti movement, who have read women Bhakti saints and their lives and their memories in the last 40 or 50 years or so. So that is what we would be doing. And perhaps I would go for next 1 hour, and then we could have question and answers. So so one that, I mean, as most of us are familiar with Bhakti movement and Bhakti and Sufi movement for that matter in some way, and the syncretism, the syncretic traditions in some way or the other, we know that this was in that sense a response to the ritual, the Brahmanical ritualism, the Brahmanical monopoly over knowledge and spirituality, and to feudal on one hand, and at the same time it was also a response of common people to the feudal social order, the feudal social order, which was deeply deeply hierarchical, which was deeply patriarchal, deeply intersected with caste, Brahmanical, and therefore this order, this feudal social order, actually denied common people. It denied women and lower castes access to divinity, to the connection with the divinity, so to say. And therefore Bhakti movement in a sense emerges from that. I mean, rather than, no, I mean, it's really interesting to see that Bhakti movement urges, and Bhakti, no, that would mean intense love, which means intense love, devotion, surrender, no, very passionate kind of love, affection for the deity. It actually is an alternative to, it takes a different path, and therefore it interrogates and rejects the other dominant paths to divinity. I mean, it refuses to follow duty, no, dharma. It refuses to follow duty and duty to follow social order, your place in social order, the duty that all the people were assigned to follow the social order, to achieve the salvation. So the liberation was seen in terms of following dutifully your place and your role in the society. And Bhakti movement challenges that. Bhakti movement challenges the mediation of Brahmanical ritualism, the need of Brahmanical priests to connect with the divinity. It actually also rejects the torturing of the body, the tiring of the body, and that path to connect to the divinity. So in that sense, it in a way it seeks to claim the access to the divine, and therefore it may seem that it is only a religious and spiritual descent. No, I mean, it is claiming to and women sense, and also the sense from the artisan and lower castes, the sense from the common people. These sense seek to access the divinity, but this spiritual and religious transgression descent is also enmeshed into the social descent, social and political descent. They are also actually seeking not just an alternative path to liberation, but they are also actually they are also asserting an alternative social life. They are also asserting, they are also challenging, and these sense and these women sense, they had struggled throughout their life to fight against, to free themselves from the chains of, from the restraints of the social, the constraining social norms, no, the patriarchal norms, or the caste norms. And we see that this is also therefore in some ways a social descent, an attempt to seek transformation in material lives too. Though there have been many there have been many critiques of this, I mean, or there have been some suspicions or doubts about this too, that how much transformation and descent descent has been possible through Bhakti movement, social descent has been possible through Bhakti movement, or whether Bhakti movement actually contained the descent within the spirituality and literature. So there has been some critics have also argued, or some have also urged us to explore, to examine that what has been the impact of this sense, impact of their lives, their poetry, their compositions, what has been the impact of them on the ordinary people and the material world, the social world, and in the and bringing in transformation in the dominant social order. So that is what, though I mean there has been some debates also around that. But what we would do is that we would try to look at all these debates and try to see that what were the possibilities of feminism, feminist consciousness, what were the possibilities for freedom for women, the autonomy of the individual self of women that these Bhakti movements and Bhakti saints had afforded. So that is what we would discuss today. So I mean, I think we could start with the lives of this Bhakti saints. And again, even if I don't go into the details, maybe we could just take a few examples. I mean, there is very interesting work by Uma Chakravarti herself on Tamil Bhaktins. She talks about Ammayar and Avayyar and Andal, and she talks of Akka Mahadevi. And very interestingly, she points out, and there are other scholars too, who point out that how these women, especially the women who were married, had to struggle to pursue the path of bhakti. It was not so difficult. So the men could be householder, and they could be saints too. But for women to be a saint and to be a householder was extremely difficult. Her duties as wife, so to say, the expectations from her the expectations from her in terms of domesticity, in terms of modesty, no, the feminine modesty, the expectations of the duties of mothering and the duties towards the husband. These actually intermingled in their path towards bhakti. And therefore, I mean, so to say, their love for the divine and their love for the husband could not be aligned, so to say, which was not a difficulty for the male saints. We do see that male saints could just ignore their wives, and we have now several stories. I mean, I don't really need to, but no, from different regions, from Maharashtra, we would see that these saints we often hear the stories of difficult wives that these male saints had, but they could just ignore their wives. They could just, in that sense, they could do away from their, but women, their duties, their householder life did not become a hindrance in their path towards bhakti. Whereas for women, they could not, if they were to pursue the path of bhakti, their householder life impinged on them. I mean, very interestingly, Uma Chakravarti talks about how even their body, female body, the female body, which is often sexed, which is often seen in terms of through the sexual gaze, which is often seen, therefore defined through the notions of modesty and honor and respectability. And therefore, how can a woman, I mean, in case of Mirabai, we know that now that who wants to dye herself in the color of Krishna, could not really then could not remain, or her husband did not think that she remained then a beautiful wife, if she wanted to dye herself in the color herself in Krishna, by the love of Krishna. Similarly, and therefore, Uma Chakravarti actually points out that in many of these southern saints, bhakti saints, Akka Mahadevi and others, they could not be seen as saints. They could not be seen as saints by others. They could not be seen as wise people by others with their female bodies, because with their female bodies as women, they were always sexualized in some way or the other. And therefore, what we see is that often these women, and now therefore, for instance, in Tamil and in southern India, we see that there are these stories of miracles by which Avaiyar and Ammayar, they actually transform themselves into a demoness or an emaciated woman, or they gave up their youth and beauty, I mean, in that sense, through miracle, because it was difficult to see them as, it was difficult to see their embodied selves, their embodied sense. And therefore, we see that there, and rather we would see that therefore Akka Mahadevi, and that's really interesting. That is the case of Akka Mahadevi and Lal Ded, who actually gave up clothes. Now, Akka Mahadevi is seen as a naked saint. She walked naked. And how do we understand that? I mean, that is a challenge to their. That is a challenge to the notions of modesty, the codes, sexual codes, the codes of femininity that define their bodies, that mark their bodies. So they refused, they did not want to be seen as sexualized women, sexualized women's bodies, but they wanted them to be seen. They wanted their fellow mendicants, their fellow saints, and the society. They wanted them to see them as as saints, as wise women, not as women or as men, as sexualized women, and therefore they gave up in that sense. No, I mean, what Akka Mahadevi says that, I mean, if nothing has been hidden from the divine, and then no, I mean, why should we hide ourselves under the clothes? Now, so to say, what she is saying that, and therefore she covered herself with her long hair, and she walked naked, because she thought that the fellow saint should not just see her nakedness, but they should actually go beyond that and see what she is saying. And therefore, what I'm saying is that these women saints and their lives reveal to us their struggles against the patriarchal codes of modesty and honor and respectability. They also tell us, I mean, Mirabai's life, again, life, and not just the stories that have come to us through films, but also the way in which Mirabai is sung, how Mirabai comes to us through her voices, through her bhajans. The life of Mirabai shows that her. Am I audible? Okay, yeah. No, there was some problem with my internet connection, so I just wanted.
Yes, you're audible.
My internet connection is unstable, so I just wanted to confirm. Mirabai, and again, we know there have been stories around that. Mirabai, who was, and that's really interesting. No? Mirabai's life is really interesting in terms of the dissent against the social feudal order, no? the royal order that she actually wages. So Mirabai, who was not seen an ideal wife, an ideal daughter-in-law, and therefore she was, I mean, there have been attempts to take her away, to get her away from her ecstatic love for Krishna. No, and then many of us may have read those stories around. No, in her hagiography, there are stories around how she was. There may have been attempts to poison her, to send, and she could, and so in that sense, this the kind of threats and the kind of constraints that they actually had to brave, they actually had to confront from the patriarchal order, also the feudal order. I mean, the Mirabai is also placed in Mewar, Marwar. That is that is also that was the land of the control, the tensions over land, the tensions over control over land. That is also the region where there were many small chieftains, and there were also tensions and rivalries amongst them in terms of lineage. And so it's in all this, and therefore, but they lived the life of the privilege. And we see that Mirabai also challenging this feudal social order, Mirabai also giving up this privileged life and taking up, what Parita Mukta says, upholding the life, the common life of people. So she actually takes up, she actually upholds, gives up the life of privilege, the privilege that the chieftains had, that the royal and the feudal lords and their families and their communities had, and she upheld the life of commoners, people's life, and therefore she became a mendicant, a wandering singer, right? So, and that's really interesting that she also takes up Ravidas as her guru, who is from Chamar caste. So, and she herself came from Rajput family. So we see that these Bhakti saints were waging critique of the patriarchal norms within the family and conjugality. They refused to so Mirabai and many others, they refused to consummate their lives with their husbands. They refused to be married to their husbands. They refused, in that sense, also to bear children. And they, because they wanted to be, they refused to be tied to that life. They refused to be tied, to be bound to the life of a wife, which could not be given away, the motherhood, which could not be given away, and they which could not be aligned with the life of a bhakti saint, and therefore they actually struggled against that. They actually challenged that, and their lives therefore become a site of their dissent, a site of their struggle against the against the dominant social order. And so is the case of many other saints. I mean, saint women like some of the Dalit women saints, lower caste Dalit women saints from Maharashtra, Chokramaya's wife and sister, Nirmala Bai and Soira Bai. I mean, so what was very significant in Bhakti movement is that they talked about their love for God through their everyday life, through their this worldly. So their bhakti was this worldly. It was not, as is often, if it was otherworldly spiritualism, it was also this worldly descent for them. And through their lives, we can see their descent, this worldly descent, their descent to this worldly social order. So we do see them challenging these notions. We also see, life like that of Janabai, and maybe we would also, I want to also read some of her poetry. Janabai, who is a maid servant at Namdev. And it's also interesting that, especially, I mean, for those of us who in Maharashtra, we see that these women saints are often seen in their, linkage with, in association with their male guru. Namayachi Jani. So in that sense, Tukachi Behina. So in that sense, we do see Jnandevachi Mukta. So we often see Janabai, or so only in their relationship to, so their own self, their own subjectivity, there is often an attempt. So they're also challenging that. So Janabai actually says that, I know that I'm just a maid servant, I'm just a domestic servant in his house, and therefore I'm illiterate and I don't know anything, and I'm ignorant, and I haven't read much, I'm not learned like others. But she also says that I have the right to the path of wisdom, I have the right to, and she actually takes up that path. So this is the struggle that these women had made, and I think therefore looking at this struggle through their lives, it's something that is significant. But two, I think, and I can't really go into the details of it right now, but we also need to, we also need to read their voices, their poetry, their lives, but also what have they written, what have they composed. And that is, again, we see that is really not just revolutionary. We do see a revolutionary spirit in their poetry, where they are again challenging the social codes and the moral codes in the everyday language, in the local language. So actually, all Bhakti poetry is in the regional local languages. It is also the Bhakti poetry also uses local genre of poetry, local meter, like Ovi in Maharashtra. So in that sense, it became the movement of the common people. These Bhakti saints came from, some of them, they were from upper caste, from royal families, from the privileged families, but they also challenged the orders. They gave up their privileges. These saints also gave up their privileges that came up with their social status. but many of these bhakti saints and most of these bhakti saints and everywhere across India, they came from common people, from artisan castes, from agricultural laborers, and women, because they were denied the connection with the divinity. And not just that, they were challenged, as I said, that they were challenging the denial of connection with the divinity, but they were also challenging the feudal social order, actually, that was repressing them, and that was in that sense constraining them within the dutiful life as wife, or as within the caste-based occupations. So we do see that kind of challenge too. But through their voices, again, if we read their voices, as I said, that they wrote in the regional languages, and I mean, we have heard there have been several. Their compositions have been sung throughout these centuries, and they are sung even now, and they have come up in different forms. But their poetry, through their poetry, they also talked about their everyday world. So we know that they talked about their occupations, they talk about their families, they talked about the struggles that they had within the family, the conflicts, the tensions that they had within the families, within their married life. They talked about the struggles that they had in their neighborhoods and in their village with the other people around them. So in that sense, they talked about the common people and their struggles, and also about their miseries. I mean, someone like Chokha Mena and then many others, they also talked about the miseries that they had to experience within this dominant order. So in that sense, I think that we need to understand this dual challenge, dual critique of the Bhakti movement, the spiritual religious critique, and at the same time social political critique. I mean, in southern India, many of these like Avaiyar and others, they actually also talk of a different, who is an ideal chieftain. Through their poetry, they also talk of who is the ideal chieftain, who is the ideal lord, and how do we, what is the ideal polity, and how should a state should be ruled. So they talk about social life, they talk about in that sense the politics, they talk about the public world, and also they talk about their everyday intimate inner world. But some of their voices, and perhaps there is no time to read it, but I would just in that sense would like to talk about some of maybe Janabai's or Muktabai's poetry. Muktabai, who was Jnaneshwar's, I mean, we know her as Jnaneshwar's sister, but so there is this very interesting verse and interesting story of Muktabai and her verse, that once Muktabai is bathing, and Sangdev, I mean, accidentally sees her, and he looks away. So actually she says that, no, I mean, as there are, I mean, do cows and cattle wander with clothes? So you can, you have seen curves and in the wall, or but why can't you see why do you feel ashamed about seeing and why do you look away? So why can't your gaze be pure? Why do you look at women's body? Why do you need to look at women's body only in a sexualized through a sexualized gaze? So she says, I mean, Binti se konade, I mean, I don't know if I can read some of it, but she is one is not ashamed to stare at the niches in the wall. Do the cows grazing in the fields have any clothes? I too am like the cows. Why are you embarrassed at my sight? Now she says. Or there is very interesting verse by again Janabai. Na? And again we will need to see. I mean, I'm emphasizing this, but how do we? One often does not see this, but how do we see this refusal of and challenge to the sexualization of their bodies by these women saints? Now, so we have Janabai actually who says, many of us, at least from Maharashtra, we would know, where she says that I have become slut for you, for the divine. She says that I'm become like whatever, the prostitute. I have given up shame. I don't want to be bound to the womanly duty, to the womanly modesty, but I want to love you in that sense, to surrender to you like like a shameless woman. So now one of her poem where she says, I will let my sari slip from my head to the shoulders, hold my head high and walk into the marketplace. Walking into the marketplace, it's something that it's seen shameful. Taking cymbals in hand and veena on shoulder, I will go. Let me see who forbids me. I have opened a shop in Pandharpur. Dukan ughadle, and opening a shop is, in that sense, it's seen as selling your self. Put oil on my wrist now. Jenny declares herself a prostitute, leaving you, oh God, this home. So in that sense, and there is often an attempt to spiritualize this, look at this only in spiritual sense. But one has to recognize that if it was a spiritual critique, and if it is a spiritual discussion, it is also a social discussion. Now, where it is also a social critique, it is also a social dissent. And therefore, I think you may, those of you who know Andal, you would know that Andal actually, her poetry, and that is also true for Mirabai and to many others actually, they expressed, so her poetry is very sensual. She expresses her love for the divine, because that is what the surrender and devotion as a lover, as a woman surrenders to a man in love, as a woman devotes herself, and commits herself to her lover, to her male lover. Similarly, they actually express their love and ecstatic love, because that is the metaphors. These are the metaphors that they use, and it has been, what I am trying to underline is that to use that kind of language, they were socially ostracized. They had to actually face the anger from the community. They also had to face the criticism and also torture from the society, from their families, from even sometimes from the local local chieftains for that. And they braved that, they confronted that. So this is something we need to explore, and rather than treating it only as any other text, we need to locate that text in their time, in their context, and see what kind of critique. Rather than seeing it only at the spiritual level, we need to also see how they are talking to their time and talking to their society, because bhakti is about that. Bhakti is not about Bhakti is not only about the otherworldly spiritual life. Bhakti is about this worldly social, cultural, material life. And therefore, we need to look at their lives and their poetry, their voices in that context. Maybe I would just take another 5 to 10 minutes, but I also want to actually talk about maybe how do we look at, as I had said at the beginning, how these women saints were remembered. That these saints were not those who existed in the past, but they are the ones whose memories have lived throughout the centuries. No? And therefore, we need to explore, and we need to examine, and we need to analyze how and whether and how these women saints like Muktabai and Janabai and Bhainabai, how are they still part of our world? How do we still remember them? Who remembers them? And how do they remember them? And there is very interesting work by Mukta Parita, who looks at Mirabai again, and who interestingly points out that because Mirabai lived a very sorry, I was just looking at the chat, so I got distracted. So because Mirabai led a very revolutionary, very rebellious kind of life, and she rebelled against her conjugal clan. She also was actually criticized by her and alienated from her natal clan. So because she gave up the royal codes and royal norms, no, that bound her. Mirabai, Mukta Parita observes that Mirabai, for several centuries, Mirabai was not only not remembered, but there was an anger, there was hostility to Mirabai in that region, and especially amongst those clans, amongst the chieftain clans, those communities. So we see that Varda Mukta actually observed that they refused to remember her, they refused to sing her songs, they refused to celebrate and remember her. But there was a kind of discomfort, hostility, no? For several centuries, we do see that continued. But Mirabai was remembered by the people who associated with her, who identified with her, who related with her. And therefore, Mukta Parita points out that how there are these, so what are these bhajanik communities now? Who sing, who sang and who sings Mirabai's bhajans? And then she points out that now, because she took Ravidas as her guru, and no, so there were these Dalit communities who now, because being suppressed by the caste order, they actually sing Mirabai, they claim her, and Mirabai's gesture, Mirabai's act of taking Ravidas as her guru, and also her refusal, her struggle, her fight against the feudal order, that led them to sing her. So they have been singing Mirabai's bhajans. And Mukta Parita actually therefore maps that there are different Mirabais that are sung by these different communities. There are agricultural communities, no? And again, these were the agricultural communities who fought against these local chieftains and their control over land. And therefore they have been singing, as these agricultural families, communities have been singing, they sing Mira's bhajans, they remembered her. So Mira's not really so it is Mira's hagiography, that her followers, and these are different followers, and these are followers from different subaltern groups. Mira is also remembered by, as we know, women, widows, women who have and Mira refused to be so to say, refused to be bound by Stri Dharma and by Pativrata Dharma, but she also refused the ascetic life of widow. Actually, she became a wandering singer. Now she went to the people. She did not live and enforce widowhood within her palace, but she left her home and she took guru, and then she actually wandered. No, so in that sense, there are these women who actually remember her, who sing her, and her protests and her rebelliousness. And therefore, I think, and there have been very interesting works on how, therefore, the other saints like Mirabai, how they are remembered, who sings them, how are they remembered, how have these bhajans, I mean, as they are orally transmitted, what have been the changes in that? Now, what have been the interactions? How have they traveled all across the world? So we do see that Mirabai's bhajans are sung not only in Gujarat and Rajasthan, but they are also sung in other parts of India and also in other parts of the world. Kabir, no? Again, Kabir is someone who has been, so we do see that these, the memories of these saints, memories of these Bhakti saints have traveled from, from their specific time and from their specific place to different times and to different regions, to different spaces. And mapping and looking at these memories and mapping, therefore, how their rebelliousness and their protests have been central, how their protests, their rebelliousness have been central in the memories of these women. It's something that I want to underline. So, I mean, just to wrap up, just to conclude, what I'm saying, therefore, is that the feminist consciousness can be seen, and the urge of these women to break free of the societal controls, and societal controls which are not just patriarchal, not just the patriarchal controls that denied women the access to divinity and salvation, but also the societal controls that compelled them, that relegated them to the life of domesticity and the life of modesty, and refused them a life of knowledge, a life of creativity, freedom to imagine and freedom to be creative, freedom, a life of self-expression. So they are seeking, they are yearning for this freedom, this freedom from these patriarchal controls. We saw that they also sought freedom from the codes that sexualize their bodies, the codes, the social codes, the social rules, the social norms that see them as female bodies, no, object sexualized bodies, and therefore they also imposed the notions of honor. No, that as a Mirabai, no, what can she do as a from a royal family? What she, a royal woman, or even women from commoners, women from common people, women from lower castes and artisanal classes, how they were also sexed. There was also an imposition of sexuality and respectability on them, and how they were yearning to free themselves from that. And so on one hand, there is the roots of feminist consciousness are in their yearning for freedom, but their yearning for freedom, which is part of is part of their revolution against the dominant social order. It was not merely the literature, it is not merely spiritual, it is not merely literary, but it is also the social dissent that we need to underline. So I think I will stop here, and perhaps we could have your comments and questions if you have any. If any of you have studied or if you want to share share about the saints in your own regions or that you have studied or are familiar with, that is also something that I would like to hear.
Shruti, you may take over. Shruti?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, as we have seen that women are still objectifying, getting objectified today or as well, we are really happy to get a new perspective of feminism through your talk to this section. I'm really glad to hear this from you, and all of us are really happy to have you with us. And thank you for giving us such a well-versed knowledge, and it was a pleasure to hear from such a dynamic personality. And ma'am, we have a small Q&A section. So for that, we have speakers. So I would like to invite Miss Priyanka Mali and Miss Samreen Qureshi from third year BA to take over the Q&A section. Please show yourself. Over to you, Priyanka and Samreen.
Well, thank you, Shruti. So now I, Samreen, and my friend Priyanka Mali, we'll be having the question answer session. We'll be handling it. So the first question we go with is, ma'am, was there a difference in essence in the poems of Therigatha and the Bhakti saints?
Yeah. Yeah. Should I just answer this question first, and then if there are any questions? I can take up this question right now, no? Yeah, okay. So actually, I haven't really, I mean, I'm not an expert on Therigatha. Again, I have read Uma Chakravarti and others on Therigatha. But what I know is that Buddhist bhikkhunis are, I mean, they have renunciated their life. No? They are bhikkhunis. Women saints are householders. They are part of the families. They are part of this world, this worldly life. They have not renunciated it, and therefore that is really the central distinction between them. Though we do see, and we also see that as Buddhism has been claimed, and the the democratizing potential and liberatory potential of Buddhism has been claimed by the subaltern groups, by the anti-caste movements here in India. They have also claimed Bhakti. So in that sense, they are a part of the same tradition. But so no, because they challenged the dominant social order, and in Buddhist times it was the mercantile. She was also the mercantile class that was early ancient India, early India. But what we see is that the distinction between them also mainly in terms of that being renunciations and householders, and two, we do see that there have been lot of debate and lot of tensions about allowing women space, including women in the Buddhist in Buddhism, in the Buddhist order, as against the participation of Bhakti, woman Bhakti saints in the Bhakti movement. So Buddhist has been, I mean, in terms of bhikkhunis, because they had to give up the householder life, and people did not want women to give up you want women to cook for you at home, you want women to be your wives and mothers and whatever, and therefore you want them there, and therefore they were allowed, and therefore, though that was extremely difficult part for Bhakti saints. But Buddhist bhikkhunis, people, again, those women really had to, Amrapali and others, they really had to brave, they really had to confront lot of struggle to take up the path of Buddhist renunciation.
of feminism. So thank you, ma'am. The next question is, how has the evolution of feminism affected society?
Sorry, I didn't get your last part. How has the feminism
Has affected society?
How has feminism affected society in that sense? I mean, perhaps, I mean, either if you want to elaborate, or I would, feminism, because it asks for transforming the social order, and it actually asks us to transform the lives, the roles that women play in this social order. This social order, historically, at different times, the social order is anchored in the subordinate roles of women. As I had said that, so feminism challenges that. So feminism is often seen as something that disrupts the social order, because it wants to revise the social order. It wants to transform the social order, which is dominant, which actually, in that sense, oppresses women across different classes, different groups, and therefore feminism seeks to do that. And therefore, sometimes feminism is seen as feminism is often seen as threatening, when women assert their own freedom. When women, I mean, just imagine that if we in that sense start, I'm just saying that it's not about having, what is often said, that should women have uncontrolled freedom. It's not about being uncontrolled freedom. It's an issue of being freedom, the basic freedom, the human freedom, that human, that is guaranteed by our by our state. So feminism has very deep impact on the society. But feminism also has to confront the anti-feminist backlash, and therefore we do see that there have been changes within the society. We have seen in the last, I mean, if we can talk about at least maybe last 200 years, not 2 centuries, from the colonial period, maybe we see that lot of changes have taken place, but lot of new sometimes restrictions also come up. So that has always been the tussle, that feminism seeking autonomy and freedom for women, equality for women, and then there are anti-feminist forces that again seek to control women in new ways.
So now, our next question, ma'am, it is said that, do you think that both genders are entitled to the same social, economical, or consider political rights?
What do you think in that sense? Yes, no? I mean, in that sense, we do see that both genders, and now we also talk of transgender, but the same rights, but not just both genders, but also men and women, and people across different religions, different castes, different communities, they are also entitled for those rights. So sometimes, sometimes the right that perhaps a poor man, a working class man, does not have, and therefore women from that group also don't have that right. So they are equal in not having any rights. We don't want that kind of equality, right? I mean, we want equality in rights when not just men and women, but also men and women from different classes, from different religions, regions, as I said, from different castes, they should have the equal rights. So denial of women certain rights and denial of men certain rights, that is also not really good. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
And was there a difference in essence in the poems of Treta and the Bhakti saints?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Priyanka, I think you have already dealt with that question.
Okay,
Maybe we can go to the Zoom chat box. There are quite a few questions
Actually,
there.
I'll just
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we have another question. It is, did the Bhakti saints have an impact on the social life of that period, especially with respect to the position of women?
Yeah. So what I said was that they did have some impact, though, because it was not just a religious movement. It was also a social movement. It was not just a religious protest, spiritual protest, but it was also a social protest. And therefore, it did have an impact on the social order of that time, because they were challenging all the social codes, not just the patriarchal codes, but even in terms of the land relations, in terms of the caste relations, in terms of the economic relations within the society, the material relations, and therefore they did have some impact. Though there have been many scholars who have argued that they sang of such revolution, but did that revolution, to what extent they could realize that revolution? They had a revolutionary ideas. They had imagined a revolution in their poetry, in their compositions, but could they actualize it? Could they realize it in the social world? To what extent? Not could they, but to what extent they could do that? It's something that needs more, and therefore there has been, in that sense, limitation of that too. That their poetry seems very very revolutionary. So I mean, someone, as I said, that someone like Janabai is saying that I will become a slut for you. No, I mean, in the slut, in the sense, why slut? Because I don't want to be bound to one husband. I want I want to love the divine. And therefore, if you call me slut because I am not pure to him, just to him, committed to him, I don't mind being a slut. So if she could say that in her verse, but could women do that in their real? How much would they were able to do that? It's something that still needs, we still need more analysis in finding how people who sing, who still sing, or who in the past they had sung their, who were their followers, who sang them, how their lives were changed and transformed through the Bhakti poetry. Yeah.
Okay. If the feminist movement is relevant and necessary today as it has been in the past?
Sorry, I was looking at the chat and I thought you were reading from the chat, so I was looking for that question. I didn't hear you. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question is the feminist movement as relevant and necessary today as it has been in the past?
Again, I would ask you, I mean, what do you think? That do we think that women are, I mean, isn't it relevant? I mean, in both ways. On one hand, we often think that some of us may feel that we don't experience the same kind of restrictions, the same kind of discrimination as women did earlier. And we do find that many women who come from, now we often think that there are women from socially disadvantaged group, socially marginalized group, rural. No, we often say that women from rural, they still need that, they still need struggle, feminist struggle for equality. But two, I also think that though we may think that we have all the choices, we also know that those choices, when we talk of Me Too, when we think of, and when we know that at present in India, there are only 15% of women. The work participation rate is, I think, 15 or even less than that, perhaps 15 or around that. No? So with such low work participation of women, that means women are dependent on their families, on their husbands, their fathers. And then don't we think that feminism is relevant? So it may seem that we have certain choices, and there are, I mean, I'm not denying that women may have certain choices, certain rights, but there are certain more deeper restrictions and inequalities too. And therefore feminism, I think, is still very much relevant. Does that
We have
answer?
another question.
Yeah.
We have another question. Did the male Bhakti saints contribute to the upliftment and empowerment of women?
Again, I mean, I won't be able to say much at this point, but we do see that there have been restrictions. We do see that someone like Namdev, Tukaram, I mean, we see in both ways that some of them, they did try to like Sokha Mera, na? I mean, his wife and he not only he is a but his wife, he's a saint from untouchable caste, but his wife and his sister both become in that sense he sees them that that autonomy and that wisdom in them to so that they are the freedom to be bhakti saint, to bhakti poet in them, freedom to talk to the divine, the freedom to express, to write, to compose, so there are some saints, male bhakti saints, who see the women saints, who see them as free, who see them as autonomous, who see them with capabilities for self-expression and with the capabilities to, but we also see many, I mean, who see that women are women need control, women need to be controlled, and women need to be subjugated, and women need to be restricted, and therefore we also see that because they uphold the patriarchal order, they think that the family should not be disturbed, women should not leave the family, leave the husband and be like Mirabai, wandering saint. So they want them under restriction. So we do see both the tendencies in them. No?
Okay. So with this note, thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening us with your answers. And I would thank the participants also for proposing such interesting questions and making the session so lively. So now I request to Shruti to take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Simran.
Moment, before we can go to Shruti, there are a few comments and questions in the Zoom chat box, ma'am. Anika ma'am, if you can see, Neeta Dhoti wants a bibliography. You can give us some translations of the saints' works.
Oh, yeah. I mean, actually, you can perhaps Google and find out, but there have been many. I mean, because there have been so many Bhakti saints, we have several translations. Mirabai has been, Andal has been translated everyone actually has been translated very widely in English, because they have also been used,
I also managed to get Bainabai, Janabai, they are translated.
Yeah, exactly, all of them.
Abba Khatun,
all of them.
All of them are available.
Yeah.
Both YouTube video, even they are sung also.
Exactly.
So you can watch the YouTube video as well as the lyrics are also available.
Yeah, and you can see them, and you can also, I mean, to begin with, maybe you want to go to the classic text, Women Writing in India, Suji Tharu and K. Lalita. They start with translations of some of the early Bhakti poems, so you could do that.
And there are some interesting comments, ma'am, if you could read it.
I will just.
Dr. Shanti says, congratulations, Professor. I just have a viewpoint. Women at different points of our history have used their agency to find space in the religion-driven cultures. But these women are not part of the religion-influenced cultures that train us. They stay as stand-alone examples, not reachable. My problem is with religion.
I mean, in that sense, what we need to do is that, and perhaps here I won't be able to say much, but we need to distinguish between religion as an institution and therefore institutionalized religion, which has always been, in that sense, restricting, limiting, constraining, and religious practices. And Bhakti is not a sectarian, and therefore I'm not really, in that sense, one understands that there are both limitations and challenges within Bhakti too. But in that sense, religious practices across different religions have actually allowed, as you said, certain agency to women, though institutionalized religion has always, in that sense, has upheld the order in some way or the other, and violently and brutally. I mean, not just in that sense through its religious codes and norms, but also by exercising violence. No. So definitely, I mean, I'm with you in that, being against the institutionalized religion.
I think we'll conclude with one comment by Dr. Binu Kapoor. She says, thank you for an enlightened talk. So present women have more freedom in following bhakti and spiritualism as that of the past. That's a positive approach.
Yeah.
So would you like to comment, ma'am, on this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, in the sense that, yes, women would have, and what kind of religion and spiritualism? No? I mean, we will have to, again, the meaning that religion and spiritualism had in the past and in different time periods has changed also now. And therefore, I don't see Bhakti movement only as a religious movement. I mean, I had said at the beginning that it is a religious critique, but it is also a social critique, and it is also a social protest. So definitely, it is good that we have more space for religious, but we don't have a space for religious critique. We have a space for religious, to follow the path of religion and spiritualism, but whether we have the space for religious dissent is, I'm not sure of. We need to discuss that separately.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I would now ask Shruti Pandey to take over.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you for this. Indeed, this was a enlightening section. I don't have any words, and I still can't believe that this session got to an end this soon. I hope we have learned a lot of things from this. And further, I would like to invite Dr. Shobha Bharat ma'am from Home Science Department to offer the vote of thanks. Shobha ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Shruti. A very good afternoon to one and all. I would like to express my deep gratitude to the trustees of SPRJ Kanyashala Trust for their constant support in all our endeavors. I would like to express my thanks to our enthusiastic director of SPRJ Kanyashala Trust, Dr. S. Kundavali. My sincere gratitude and appreciation to our eminent resource person, Dr. Anaga Tamle, for the wonderful insights into the topic In Search of Our Past, Roots of Feminist Consciousness Amongst the Women in Bhakti Movement. This engaging session added immense value in understanding and getting a glimpse of the journey of Indian feminism through the ages. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking time off your busy schedule to be the resource person for today's webinar and share your knowledge with all of us. I acknowledge with gratitude the presence and huge contribution of Professor Vibhuti Patel to the series of webinars titled Indian Feminism Through the Ages conducted by our college. My heartfelt thanks and appreciation to our dynamic principal who is constantly motivating and supporting all the activities undertaken by the team and staff members of our college and the Women's Development Cell. In fact, she has spearheaded these series of webinars taken up by the Women's Development Cell. To our IQAC coordinator, Mr. Raju Chauhan, and head of the Women's Development Cell, Dr. Rekha Randive, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for encouraging us to explore and initiate new activity webinars under the Women's Development Cell. A big thank you to all the members of the Women's Development Cell for their wonderful efforts towards this webinar. I thank the Vice Principals of the Arts Faculty, Madhuri Vaidya, and the Commerce Faculty, Dr. Manju Prabha, for their presence and support for today's event. I express my thanks to all the principals, vice principals, and other dignitaries who have joined us for this webinar. I express my gratitude to all my colleagues at Srimati P.N. Doshi Women's College for their presence and constant encouragement. My sincere appreciation and thank you to Hashmat Khan for our technical support, and our students Shruti Pandey for comparing today's webinar, and Priyanka Mali and Samreen Qureshi for handling the session. And a big thank you to each one of the participants for attending and participating in one more webinar of the series. Please do join us for the next webinar titled Stri Purush Tulna, Life and Times of the Feminist Text in the 19th Century. On 19th February. Thank you once again. Have a